While some Republicans are going to hang on to their Trump legacy, others are starting to threaten their own party. In a recent New York Times op-ed, former CIA officer, chief policy director of the House Republican Conference, Evan McMullin, 2016 nominee, said that the GOP has forsaken democracy. He urges like-minded Republicans to challenge the party directly with a third-party effort.
Interesting. Back to discuss our Democratic strategist, Michael Starr Hopkins, and co-host the Realignment podcast, Marshall Koslov. Gentlemen, always great to see you both.
Good to see you, gents.
Marshall, this is pretty funny to me. So Evan McMullin, of course, and he's a prominent member of the NeverTrump conservative movement, threatening to start his own third party. I mean, just strategically, what do you think of this play, and put it in the broader context?
I don't want to jump the gun, but this is coming out at the same time as Steve Schmidt has announced he's now a Democrat.
Let's make that up.
Steve Schmidt has now announced he's a Democrat. So it's easy to dunk on Steve Schmidt for a variety of reasons, especially considering his Twitter late night, let's just say, call outs to AOC.
AOC thirst.
On a deeper level, we should contrast the way the two of these guys are handling this. Steve Schmidt is being honest. He's a Democrat. That's the deal. He, in many ways, is perfectly comfortable in Joe Biden's Democratic Party, and you really should admire his honesty on that part, especially considering it's much harder to grift off of that honesty. Evan McMullin is also a Democrat. It's very clear he's a Democrat. He hasn't been a Republican for a long time, and his inability just to admit that it's over for his version of the Republican Party, and at the end of the day, if he even was truly interested in reforming the Republican Party, he would do it within the party, not by launching weird third-party bids that will get a bunch of money, maybe from Silicon Valley folks and New York finance types, but won't actually do anything. So you have to look at these two decisions in the same context.
I agree with you, which is that Steve Schmidt is at least being honest here. And Michael, the question is, are you comfortable with Steve Schmidt? Now he's a Democrat. He's registered that way. I believe also Evan McMullin, I think he voted for Joe Biden, so find themselves in that company. What do you make of this NeverTrump exodus into the Republican Party or into the Democratic Party?
The Republican Party has a huge problem. Now that Trump has taken over the party and is threatening to take 25 to 30% of the party with him, Republicans have a real quagmire because they've got to figure out what to do. The intellectual wing of the party is drifting towards becoming Democrats, while kind of the more Freedom Caucus, rebellious members of the Republican Party are threatening to leave. And so it not only makes it hard for Republicans, but I've got to admit, it makes it hard for Democrats when we try to pass legislation. It's why it's so important that we put the election stuff to the side and start talking about governing, because we've got to figure out how to put this thing back together.
Well, and this is the problem, Michael, is that it's not like Steve Schmidt is just one member of the Democratic Party. This guy is incredibly prominent in terms of cable news. He gets listened to. He and his ilk have very much driven the direction of the Democratic Party. So Evan McMullin's idea, I mean, strategic, I actually would love to see all of these people leave and go to permanent irrelevance as their own party, all 3% of the population that they make up in terms of their ideological views. I don't actually think that's going to happen, though, because they're having plenty of success directing the future of the Democratic Party. They've already pretty much effectively taken it over. So why would they go to a third party? Certainly, why would they go back to the Republican Party at this point?
Well, I would disagree that they've taken the party over. But I think if you really look at the fact that if 5, maybe 10% of Republicans started their own third party, we would really be looking at kind of a quasi-parliamentary system, because they would really control the difference. You know, when you look at the numbers between Democrats and Republicans, it's a small sliver that really decides a lot of these elections. And so there is a certain amount of power that would be had by, a third party coming in.
But I guess it's not clear to me they would be that group would actually be taking from the Republican Party.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the No Labels caucus, I think at this point, resides very comfortably within the Democratic Party, is my point, much to my chagrin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the fever has completely broken within Republicans, obviously. But, the fact that Mitch McConnell was willing to call Joe Biden and make a congratulations offer, the fact that you're now seeing Republicans start to really call out other Republicans that signed that list, I don't think the system is anywhere near close to coming back to repair. But I do think people understand that we've got to get some things done.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, Marshall, what do you generally make of that? Because I think there's two narratives that you could point to. One, you could say the Republican Party is in disarray. That is true. They also just won more votes than they've ever won, came within about 60,000 votes of winning the presidential election. So what are the lessons, really, that people are going to be taking away, the more establishment wing, like the McConnell one, and then maybe some more aspiring members like in the Senate or like a Matt Gaetz in the House?
Yeah, that's the best way to put this. So a couple problems here. Number one, Republicans down ballot did really well. So we could obviously debate Trump. We could debate Trumpism, populism, all the big ideas stuff we like. But at the end of the day, Republicans actually did pretty well. You could govern as a tax-cutting, deregulating, Supreme Court nominating normie Republican, and you do pretty well considering that. So that's the problem that the Evan McMullin and the Steve Schmidt types have, which is that it's pretty easy for the suburban upper middle class voters to separate their dislike of Trump from the down ballot part of the party. And you also made a really great point there, Sagar, when you pointed out the close and narrow margins in those swing states that enabled Joe Biden to win. I think Joe Biden was an excellent candidate. It seemed pretty clear as early as April, May that he was the perfect candidate for this moment. The Democrats don't have any other figure who's capable of governing or even having the instincts that Joe Biden has that makes Trump and Republicans so vulnerable to him. So if you're taking a step back, it's just hard to see that this disarray at a deeper structural level is going to be an issue. It is definitely an issue that Republicans underperform in suburban counties with upper middle class people. But with Trump out of the picture, at least for a tiny bit, and Democrats now holding the bag when it comes to these policy choices, you could easily imagine a world where those votes come back in 2022.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess, Marshall, in terms of Steve Schmidt being a Democrat, it really underscores how much just sort of affect and norms and quote unquote civility, or like your behavior and tying into culture, drives everything. Because Steve Schmidt, in terms of the Trump agenda, like what actually got passed, the corporate tax cuts and stuff, I mean, this is stuff that he has supported and run ads for and strategized on his entire career. The Republican Party under Trump, aside from the like uncouth behavior, didn't really do anything that he wouldn't directly support. So the reason he becomes a Democrat is because, number one, Democrats haven't really been super specific about any policies that he would have an issue with. But number two, he thinks that that sort of like that veneer of the behavior and the sort of, you know, uncouth breaking of the norms is more important than any other policy priority that he's ever supported.
Yeah, here's what I'll push back on, and I'll sort of stand for Schmidt real quick. What he would say to you is, yeah, it's true. I like tax cuts and I like deregulation, and those things are good. I also don't like the insanity that we've had around the election the past month. Right. And I'm going to prioritize, because it is important to separate. I think the norm stuff gets a little annoying after a while, but the election stuff was crazy. And the fact that Bill Barr had to resign over these things shows this isn't just this like random Trump tweeted something and then we went on our fainting couch. This was bad. This wasn't okay. Right. And Steve Schmidt would say that's what my line is. And what he would probably also say is that, you know, I want Democrats to deregulate and tax cut as well, too, which, you know, there's a decent chance that he'll get that to a certain degree. So he could easily reconcile a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. That's the fascinating thing.
That's the thing. I mean, that's my issue is he is likely to get everything he wants out of the Democrat. There's like no compromise here for him whatsoever. He's going to get everything he wants out of the Democratic Party. Gentlemen, always great to have both your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Next on Rising, co-host of the Bad Faith podcast, it's Brianna Joy Gray. She's going to join us to talk about AOC's scathing criticism of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. That's next.